Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and over the past couple of years, we've got used to a steady stream of Conservative by-elections caused by Conservative MPs either being kicked out of Parliament for being very naughty or simply resigning in a huff like dear old Nads. Every new by-election was obviously a nightmare for the leader at the time, mostly Rishi Sunak, because it got to a point where it was expected that the Tories were going to lose the seats to their opponents. But the Conservatives are no longer in government. We've just had an election. They're about to get a new leader. So you would imagine a little bit of stability will be coming to the party, at least for a while. You may be wrong. Senior Tories seem to be expecting mass resignations of their MPs triggering by-elections. But why? But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So, according to a report in the Times, there might be up to a dozen Conservative MPs standing down before the next election, it says, but some of these resignations may occur in the new year, providing the new leader with a bit of a challenge. But what's causing them to quit? Well, it's not the fear of skeletons falling out of their closets and having to resign rather than risk a huge scandal blowing up. In this particular case, it appears to be a simple case of responding to one of Labour's anti-greed policies. Labour are about to ban certain types of lucrative second jobs for MPs. In fact, technically, has it come into place? It's this month that the first lot are being banned, so it may actually be in place now. So the report is suggesting that some of these Tory MPs would rather prioritise the second jobs than be an MP. And of course, if £91,000 a year for being an MP plus a generous pension isn't enough, it's right that they should resign. Because although the block on certain types of second job for MPs is mostly designed to avoid conflicts of interest and to make sure that the MPs are spending an appropriate amount of time attending to their duty as an MP rather than second jobs, I think a really positive side effect is the potential to weed out MPs who don't really want to represent the people, just line their own pockets. It suggests that some might hang on if they get a decent job with the new leader, because you get extra pay for senior positions such as Shadow Minister, for example. But the feeling is that any Conservative MP who finds themselves on the backbench after the new leader's installed, but has options of lucrative jobs outside Parliament, are likely to stand down. And as I say, the report thinks there might be up to a dozen of these. The article does also mention declarations. Now, the Tories have benefited from their client media making a song and dance about donations and gifts for various Labour MPs. And a lot of people have got the impression that Labour actually, they were getting all these gifts and, much more than, for example, MPs of Conservatives, for example. But it wasn't true. The reporting wasn't exactly honest. Many Conservative MPs received way more in terms of value, which was not mentioned at all by the media. And partly this was because if they were government ministers, they don't have to declare them as normal. Gifts received are, for a start, put on a completely different register, and they generally don't need to declare the value of the gifts either. A very dodgy rule, which was brought in by the last Tory government, which Labour are abolishing again. However, with or without that rule, it was only for ministers anyway, so it doesn't help those Tory MPs now that they're not ministers. It doesn't apply to shadow ministers, for example. So they'll now have to declare everything and the value of everything. And the article suggests that some MPs don't really fancy a lot of scrutiny about their own gifts and donations appearing on the register when they've been used to not really having to mention them for years. So for one financial reason or another, there may be some Conservative MPs standing down from Parliament barely half a year after the general election, maybe, which is unusual behaviour to say the least. Also presents an interesting challenge for the new leader. In a sense, they should be in a much better position than Sunak was. The Conservatives are in opposition now, a new leader who will be talking about engaging with voters, the renewal of their party. You would think that Conservative-minded voters will give them a little bit of time. Should be easy win by-elections, right? After all, these were seats that the Tories won despite being about as popular as a fart in a broken lift. They are basically the safest seats the Tories have, and the public will be less angry towards them now that they're in opposition with a new leader than they were in summer. But there could still be problems. So let's consider the circumstances which could exist which will provide a threat to the Conservatives. top of the list I would have thought would be if an MP stands down in a seat which was only narrowly won against the Lib Dems. Ed Davey will push very hard in any by-election that he's presented with where his party is the main challenger, because he wants to show that he can boost the number of MPs that he has further at the next election. And a good way to do that is to win a by-election. Do you know what? The Lib Dems are pretty good at winning by-elections. There are some seats which the Tories won in July because either it wasn't clear who the tactical vote was for, or because there wasn't enough awareness of tactical voting in that area. Because during a general election, there's no real national media focus on an individual constituency, and most people don't pay much attention to local media. But with a by-election, there is. With a by-election, even if there's like 2 or 3 by-elections on the same day, the national media will actually have a bit of a focus on each area, and it will be bound to talk about who are the main challengers. And under these conditions, if the Lib Dems are the main challengers, it will also be one of those rare occasions where the mainstream media actually acknowledges their existence and even talks to them. They will be able to push issues focused on the needs of that constituency, whilst pointing out that all the Tories seem to care about is second Brexit in the form of leaving the ECHR, or the culture wars of cruelty, depending on who the new Tory leader is. There's also every chance that that new leader will make a bad start to their leadership by shitting the bed at both the dispatch box and in interviews, because Jenrick and Badenoch, neither of them are they're not good in debates, they're not good media performers. And that is not to say that if Labour are the main challengers, oh, well, the Tories should be safe as well, because Labour are also they've also, shall we say they've not exactly been on top of their PR game. However, there are other things to consider as well. First of all, you know, if Tory MPs decide to stand down in the new year, then the by-election is probably going to be like, what, March, April time? May well be even a bit later, depending on when it is. It could coincide with the local elections, for example. If Labour are the main challenger by then, they may well have improved their media game. The budget may be a lot more popular than some people are expecting it to be. And then there's something else as well. Constituencies which are between Labour and the Conservatives tend to also be the constituencies where Reform UK have the most appeal. In fact, Reform UK may well fancy themselves in certain seats, depending on which ones come up. So they will presumably go hard at the by-election as well, deploying Nigel Farage. In fact, Farage may actually spend more time in constituencies facing Tory by-elections next year than his own. It would be quite funny if someone were keeping an account of the weird places that Farage spends more time in than Clacton. But the point is, although any Conservative MPs who stand down next year should, in theory, be leaving the way clear for an easy win for whoever dons the blue rosette, the reality is there may be some seats which are banana skins. And if even a single seat is lost, like let's say 8 MPs resign and the Tories win 7 of them but they lose 1, that's still a lot of pressure on the new leader. Remember, Starmer lost Hartlepool early on in his leadership, apparently nearly quit over it, and that was a seat, it had been turning Conservative for years. The council had already flipped Conservative. It would have gone Conservative in the 2019 general election, but for the fact Reform UK took a lot of votes off the Tories. There was no way it could be described at that time as a safe Labour seat, and yet it was seen as a real low point in Starmer's leadership, and there was definitely a reaction from Labour. If Jenrick or Badenoch lose 1, or worse still more, seats in by-elections, that would almost certainly provoke a reaction from them as well. And if I was to guess, I would suggest that they will fall back on the usual thing of blaming Reform UK for nicking their votes, redoubling their efforts to turn the Conservatives into Reform UK's mini-me, which I think is what either of the political leaders is planning on anyway, but most especially Jenrick. So it may well be that the Tories are going to carry on presenting us with entertainment in the form of by-elections next year, assuming the report is accurate, of course. I wonder if the new leader will try to avoid it by giving some senior jobs to people considered at risk of stepping down. After all, no party leader relishes defending a by-election. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.